The conversation ended the way so many of them did back then. Not with shouting. Not even with raised voices. It ended with a pause that lingered too long, a sentence that trailed off, and the sound of a chair shifting on the floor. Someone said something practical, about the weather, or the drive home, or what needed to be done next. And that was it. The moment passed. The words that mattered stayed exactly where they were, lodged somewhere behind my ribs, waiting for courage that never arrived. I remember knowing, even as I nodded and moved on, that something important had just been left unfinished. I remember thinking I would come back to it later. That I would find the right moment. The right tone. The right version of myself. Later never came. Or maybe it did, quietly, over and over, and I kept not recognizing it. Silence has a way of stretching. It doesn't stay contained in one afternoon or one argument. It seeps. It settles. It becomes the shape of a relationship if you let it. And I let it. I used to believe silence was safer than anger. That holding my tongue was a sign of maturity. That time would soften the edges of whatever had happened, and the need for words would fade on its own. I was wrong about that. Anger burns hot and then cools. Silence just sits there. It grows heavier with every year that passes, every holiday, every phone call where we talk about everything except the thing that matters. I've carried more unspoken apologies than I ever realized. They didn't announce themselves as regrets back then. They felt like restraint. Like strength. Like knowing when to let things go. Now, looking back, I can see how often silence wasn't wisdom at all. It was fear dressed up as patience. I didn't speak because I didn't know how. Because I didn't want to look weak. Because I believed admitting fault would somehow erase everything good I'd done. I didn't have the language for my own feelings, much less the courage to hand them to someone else. I grew up in a world where apologies were rare and explanations even rarer. You proved yourself by moving forward, not by looking back. So when I hurt someone, intentionally or not, I told myself that doing better next time would be enough. That love, shown quietly, could replace words spoken out loud. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it didn't. There are people in my life who deserve to hear me say I was sorry. Not once, but clearly. Fully. Without conditions. A parent who carried more than I ever acknowledged, and whom I challenged when I should have listened. I thought independence meant pushing back. I never paused to consider how my silence afterward might have felt like dismissal. A spouse who learned to read my moods because I wouldn't name them. I told myself I was keeping the peace, when really I was avoiding discomfort. There were moments when a simple apology could have softened years of quiet distance. I chose calm over closeness, not realizing they aren't the same thing. A child who watched me set rules without explaining the reasons behind them. I believed authority required firmness, not vulnerability. I see now how an apology then might have taught something more important than obedience. A friend who stood beside me through seasons of my life and slowly drifted away after one careless moment I never addressed. I assumed time would smooth it over. Time, instead, carried us in opposite directions. None of these people demanded apologies from me. That's part of what made it easier not to give them. Silence rarely gets challenged. It feels mutual, even when it isn't. What stays with me now are not the arguments themselves, but the moments after. The way certain scenes return without warning. A kitchen table at dusk, untouched cups of coffee growing cold. A car ride where the radio filled space that should have held words. A phone call that ended politely, leaving a dull ache I couldn't quite name. These memories don't come with sharp edges anymore. They arrive quietly, like old letters found in a drawer you weren't looking through. And each one carries the same question: what would have changed if I had spoken then? Silence has a cost, even when it feels peaceful at the time. It creates distance that looks like normalcy from the outside. Relationships continue. Life moves forward. But something essential remains unaddressed, and it shapes how close you're willing to get afterward. You start choosing safer topics. You stop asking certain questions. You assume the other person knows what you meant, or what you felt, or what you regret. Assumptions are comfortable. They don't ask anything of us. Apologies do. As I've grown older, the urgency isn't about death itself. It's about endings that arrive without warning. Conversations you don't get to revisit. People who are no longer reachable, even if they're still alive. Time has a way of closing doors gently, without ceremony. One day you realize the chance to explain yourself has passed, not because of anger or conflict, but because life simply moved on. That's what weighs on me now. Not fear, exactly. Awareness. I see how much courage it actually takes to say, I was wrong. To admit harm without defending intent. To let someone know they mattered enough for the truth. I wish I had understood sooner that apologies aren't about erasing the past. They're about honoring it. About acknowledging the shared reality of a moment instead of rewriting it in your head. If I've learned anything this late, it's that humility isn't humiliation. Listening doesn't make you smaller. And emotional courage often arrives disguised as discomfort. I don't believe it's ever too late to feel remorse. But I do wonder about the shape it takes when it never leaves your own chest. Because there are apologies I still carry that will never be spoken out loud. Not because I don't want to say them, but because the moment has gone, and the silence has become permanent. And so I sit with that question more often than I ever expected to. Is an apology still meaningful? If it's only spoken inside your own heart?